Hello, how are you? Hi, you're muted.
Hey.
Hi.
How are you?
All right.
Like the split screen stuff here. But...
Yeah.
Ooh, interesting week, but all right. How have you been?
Well, I've been pretty good. Pretty busy, but you know, it's been pretty good.
What did you want to? What were your thoughts for presentations today?
Well, let's see. I want to go over a number of the things that are outstanding for deadlines. I have some papers to present on some topics, and then of course we'll probably go over the boards like we were going to do last week. I think that would be good. Yeah, the project boards. And then I think that's, I mean, you know, people will be coming in or we'll see where it goes. Let's see. I guess welcome to the meeting. If you're joining us on YouTube, we have a number of things today to talk about. We have some deadlines coming up. I think next week, I think the 31st is the first set of deadlines are. I have a couple papers due either the 31st or the 1st. And then going into the next couple months, we have a bunch of other deadlines. It seems like all the conferences want things at the beginning of the year. So, but that's okay. We'll just, try to write things up and get them out. And then if they don't get accepted, they don't get accepted. We can, we have this raft of papers we can keep submitting to different places, and at least we get some ideas out that way. I think that's a good way to look at it. And then, we'll be continually adding to this list. I'll show later in the meeting for, submissions and getting things out. Sometimes we have to evaluate the opportunity. If it's not a good opportunity, we can take a pass on it and submit it somewhere else. But, I think it's healthy to have things kind of in the pipeline so that we have something ready to go. Jesse, why don't you, I know you want to do the project boards and say some things. Why don't we do that now?
Okay. That. Lost that. Okay. All right. I'll share my screen. Actually. Okay. All right. So. I did a little bit of updating to the project boards. We can start with, they made the actual project board for projects, but I'll just clean this up quickly. I did a little bit of this stuff to kind of get rid of some old things, but just to kind of run through this very quickly.
Okay.
Oral planning 2020. I think we pretty much have been pretty explicit about that, so I don't think there's anything more to talk about on this one. I mean, just close that. Let's see. Okay. That's gone. Epistemic diversity optimizes across scalable properties of scientific discovery. This was Let's go here. I think this would be an interesting thing to add to epistemic discoveries, epistemological directories discussion, but I think it was more just like a, hey, check this out kind of thing. I don't think it was anything like, oh, did I just do something? Oh, this is the wrong problem.
Yeah, flip to a different board, I think. Or no, it's the same board.
That's weird. What was that one then? Yeah, it's went to the project board, but I was on this board. Oh, whatever. I also accidentally deleted it. The tab. I feel like this is maybe that kind of order. But for the next spreadsheet, I think that's pretty much, we've done some variations of that. Kind of moved on from that. Tools catalog, no tools. I think this is a really cool thing, but that's not something that I've been doing lately at all. I'll put that on there too, or I just call for involvement, actually. Maybe this one too. I'll sort that out later. We mentioned the Back to the Future thing too. That's probably, I'll put that on hold for the time being. So free electronic card, I think we're pretty much set with that. Well, at the very least, it's in a place where you finished up your stuff. I have to finish up mine, so it's not quite done yet. This is Anson's work, I believe, and I believe he has finished and submitted that. So when he gets back to the lab, then he can give us an overview of that. I don't know if he'll be here today. Constructing, I don't think this is there anything we're doing? What's the latest on this? I don't think we've heard any updates about the server.
Never got any updates on it. No, I don't know what the timeline is for that, but we'll just put that in on hold.
This new idea is slowly becoming more active. Like I am fleshing this out. I actually was working on the description of this before the meeting today. It's incomplete at the moment, but I was working on it here. But this is an active thing, and I think I really haven't spent as much time as I wanted to flesh out parts of it. But there's movement on this front already. And there has been in the past, but like there's specifically I think I still have this tab here. Yeah, this project is something that I'm contributing to, and I believe they're accepting things to kind of March with their deadline. Yeah, between January and March. So it's not urgent, but perhaps on our submission spreadsheet, I'll add it there.
Okay.
Also, I think I was trying to update the formatting or like whatever of the sheet, and I don't think I finished it. But I did a very good job. So, if it was returned to its original state, that's very okay. But yeah, that's there. I think that's pretty much it. We don't have to go over any of those things right now. As far as any particular new things to talk about today, I could add all the manuscript cards here right now, but I don't need to do that at this point in the meeting.
Yeah.
Let's look quickly at our past project board just to see. So this is the call for involvement over here. These are things over here, and this kind of fits with the law. This one fits with the law and the ethics, or the ethics and society one as well. That whole team idea. Virtual unconference open scholarship. I think that's
let's see, that's the one that that's actually a DevoWorm issue. That's a conference that's happening on the 6th or the 7th of February. It's on the submission sheet, but it's something that ended up getting submitted for DevoLearn, and so there's going to be a DevoLearn flash talk on that. So
it's technically in progress, I guess.
Yeah, we got to talk about that the DevoLearn meeting this week. So
okay, these things are pretty much the same. These are all still going, I believe. That's definitely in review phase for stuff. Shared. Okay, yeah, these are our other kind of related submissions. Yeah, and these are done. Okay. All right. Well, that's kind of a quick overview of our projects. I don't know if there's anything else you wanted to. What would you like to talk about next?
Actually, yeah. So next, maybe you could pull up the Medium. You see that Medium tab there?
Like
our Medium, not this Medium. Yeah, but it kind of reminded me of the Medium. So Oral Group, I guess, is the Medium address.
Yeah. There it is.
And go down and look. I get the first project card up last night. So if we look at that, so what I've been thinking about this is that we can do do these in the following manner. So every couple days we'll put out a card or a project, and we'll have project : and then the name of the project, and then we'll take this boilerplate here, all these words at the top, and use the same wording for every card, but instead of we'll change the title in between the quotes here. So if you're interested in, and then we'll change the name of the project, depending on what it is, and then we'll just use the same information here, I think 4 or 5 points here where we're saying how do you get involved, what are next steps to get involved. Check out the GitHub organization, legacy repos, send an email, join our meetings, and join our Slack. And then below we have the card, which is actually the description of the project. And we have the idea, the description underneath, the deliverable, the team, and then the venue. And that venue should include all of the information. I may have to update that page a little bit. I can't remember what's exactly on it right now, but that's the idea, and then people can explore that as they will. The only problem is, of course, those URLs are a little long to have in an image, but I guess that's something that we can.
Yeah, and those could also just be put it's you could just put those below hand. That's an accessibility good practice anyway. It's just to have links in this effort or anything. So. Okay, yeah, this is good. I should have my own versions of this up very soon, but I'm not that permission fee. Some of them are pretty much set too, but maybe a little more refinement on some of them. But they are here. They're ready to go. And oops, yeah. So I think this is a good initial launch into that.
Yeah. And then if you go to Twitter, if you go to the lab Twitter page.
Whoops. That's not quite the same. However, I can go there.
Like that. Thank you. So yeah, it's right there. So now I've tweeted it in that way, and we can maybe use that kind of wording on it too, where you have the project. The project will change depending on what project it is. The call for involvement, which is the Medium post, and then this little bit here, details on the Medium. So it's and then we'll have an image here So this image is from this website, but you can use any image you want for the project, like for trajectories and cognition. I don't know if you've worked out any images for it, but or figures. That's a good thing to have, is like some sort of visualization, showing something related to the project, so that people can get it captures their imagination. I think it's always better, especially like when you're sending out a tweet, to have some image underneath. But
yeah, I agree.
So okay, so that's for the that's I think the project cards. I don't know if we need to talk about those anymore, or what. Do you have any other thoughts on the project cards, or?
No, just because I haven't really been able to do much since last week, but they are I think they're a very good thing, and I'll do more than what I can. And I still would like to get to a place of I think this is good. I like seeing the call for involvement, and I think that will help, even if it's sort of like learning as we go about how to do it. I'm very glad to be part of making that happen. So yeah.
Yeah. So that's
good.
That's
all.
Oh. Good. Okay. So, actually, yeah. Why don't you? Do you have anything else to share, or do you have any other thoughts about?
Let's see. There are a few things that came up, like Slack related. I wanted to mention something interesting on Slack that is not really associated with it. It was just an interesting discussion that I saw here. So it's not vital, but we can come back to it now or later. But it was basically this. This is a really discussion. Miguel is a very cool guy. He's sort of an academic hero in terms of what he's done and where he is and all he's doing. He's been in a lot of things. Really interesting discussion between coding and some other people. Went down this chain of thought, which actually concluding with referencing. Here's Rashab. The deep learning slash coding students sort of deep learning course that I'm I volunteered a little bit in. Haven't had a lot of time for anything the last couple of weeks. But it concluded with that. However, how we got there was a bunch of interesting discussion about brains do not process information, they create it. Fizaki versus information processing, inequality 1-0. And it's just interesting, things inside out, outside in. I like this comment here. Information is it created or is it more transcribed? And just every now and then you find a really good discussion, whether it's on Twitter or somewhere else, and I feel like those are always cool to see. So that's kind of my little fun nugget of things for the week. Maybe also I will quickly mention. I don't know. I assume we're okay with talking about this for a few minutes.
Oh yeah, but, go ahead.
This is the question that I had. This is kind of a little bit related to many things that I'm interested in, and it cuts across like ABM stuff, and it cuts across some of the society and ethics and law stuff. But I would really like to. I've been thinking about this for some time, but I would like to get I would like to create. I would like to create some either ABMs, agent-based modeling, or some ways of looking at things in a multi-agent setting about risk and vulnerability. And risk is sort of a tough topic because it's sort of like it has to be this. It is rather representational and almost social. Like there's risk as in, am I gonna be able, like, maybe I even like delving this into the sense of like a philosophical issue of like, hey, okay, if even like in a sense of affordances, in a very non-representational way, okay, is it going to be a sense of I am, I'm walking through the forest or I'm walking through the jungle or whatever, and everything's fine, but if I turn this corner, oh yeah, there might be a tiger there. That's a sense of risk, sure, that's like immediate physical risk. But I also feel like it'll be interesting to take that to higher levels of stuff in terms of the risk associated with certain choices, or like how your effort or your ability to pursue things is done. Also, oh yeah, actually, I'm so glad I remember this right now. Like one, I actually had my first time ever in my life a couple weeks ago, and I wrote it down and I forgot about it until just now. It's slightly related to this. Like this could be one way to look at it. In another sense, is like I had my first time. I had a dream involving designing essentially a computational modeling experience. Like how to do it. It was like, okay, I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it. Is there a particular thing involving kind of? It wasn't at the time. It wasn't originally about risk, but essentially it is in the sense of essentially how much could, like, if different agents, like, let's say there are teams of 2 agents, okay, and there's a particular threshold about how much they could share resources with each other, and there's a sense of, let's say our 2 agents on this team could share, both share like 50% of the resources, and that would give them maybe a combined 100% total to put in this mixed pot and be able to do these activities or whatever. But 2 agents on Team B had a different capacity of sharing resources, whether that's like energy or movement or whatever. Whether that's below 50 or above 50, how would that affect their ability to function? This is like I'm not going to try to go into details here, but I'm interested in finding ways of looking at these things, and excuse me, and I was just reminded of that now, so I'll kind of mention that and kind of come back to what we're talking about here. So this discussion had some interesting responses, in part of like, oh, hold on. Oops.
Oh, you're muted, I think. Some problem with the audio. Still can't hear you. Yeah. Yeah, still can't. I don't know what happened. It looks like you're muted, but... Okay. No, you're still muted.
What about now?
Okay, now we got it. Good.
All right, that was very awkward.
Yeah,
All right.
I know.
So I was saying, just going to go through this thread. And I don't know if anybody responded in a sense, but there was at least one good response. I think 2 responses. This is really interesting. Neural processing of risk. I haven't got to look at this paper all the way, but he's a very cool guy. He worked a lot with. He's big into, as you can probably see here, existential threats and vulnerabilities. He's worked with Roman Yampolitsky, who's a big name in like AI security, or risk-related things. And also, I think Johan applied here. Yeah, he gave me 2 papers, which is interesting. Like, this one's really interesting. I've seen this before, actually. I don't know if we talked about it here before. But stress and uncertainty, definitely relevant. This paper, this is an interesting paper in general. I'll go into it here, but I think this came up at different points. Actually, let me see. I guess I'm over here. Yeah. Is this the one that was by Kristen? Yeah, this is interesting. This is actually a Kristonian paper.
Kristonian, yeah.
Because this would be interesting in terms of this, all this free energy work and surprise minimation and so on like that. Minimize the entropy of the sensory states. So I mean there's that'd be cool to look into. But this paper has come up in different forms lately. But
yeah.
I'll leave it at that for the time being. So that's kind of my fun new little thoughts on the side from this week. And I think what I would like to do is kind of mold some of that into some of the other discussions that are going in the lab. Obviously, it's not an immediate thing because there's so much other stuff going on. But just sort of things that have been on my mind this week. I think that's pretty much it. I don't think more on Twitter updates here.
Yeah.
This is kind of funny. Ladies, if he requires a lot of supervision, always wants more power, can't explain his decisions, dismisses problems as alloy edge cases, and forgets things catastrophically, he's not your man. He's a deep neuronal network. That's kind of interesting. And then, of course, a throwback to
Norbert Weiner book, Human Use of Human Beings. Yeah, that's classic book.
So again, like it's really fun. I think it was like he wrote this in the 50s or something, but it's still he first saw a lot of stuff, and it's cool. So yeah, another nod to ethics and society stuff. But that's it. That's all I got today. I'll stop sharing the screen.
Okay. Well, good. A couple notes on the last post that you showed. Yeah, I saw the one with Johan and the papers. I looked over those papers really quickly. They look interesting. Especially the free energy principle application. I know we haven't talked about that in a while, but maybe we'll come back to that at some point. And I think, we have a whole channel on the Slack devoted to it, so it seems like we should maybe talk more about it. I'm not prepared to today, so. And then, I was thinking in terms of game theory. in terms of modeling risk and perception. But not, like a standard game theory model, maybe some sort of hybrid game theory agent-based model, where, you have strategies and, they sort of like an evolutionary game theory model, where you're converging to certain strategies or states in the game. You give them a number of options, and the individuals in the population, they converge to a certain equilibrium point over time.
I think to use like fancy terminology, and I don't have this is like very much an unfinished and like developed thought, is like I like to understand how risk, essentially risk modifies, for lack of better terms, affordance perception. Like risk. I'm interested in. This has actually been a very long-standing interest of mine, and it's so hard to figure out how to talk about it. But as one approach to that right now is, how do things, in very simple terms, how do certain things almost like mechanically or like materially influence the perception of what is possible, or what can be afforded in certain situations. So, like, in a sense, risk affects, like, the sense of risk in the sense affects what, like, is, what you can do, and figuring out ways to do that as demonstrating that in an agent-based game theory, agent-based sense. Is one way to do it, and I think there's some maybe looking through that through the lens of game theory and some of the things that he mentioned, as well as in the papers, may lead me to some maybe explore some principles about that. I'll be coming back to that later.
Yeah. So when you say material, like when affordances influence what is possible, you mean like if you see an affordance or there's an affordance that exists in the environment, it kind of guides behavior, but in a way that sort of limits or gives you certain options over others.
Well, yeah, maybe I kind of reverse my word, but like almost like if I could have a way of showing here's perception of affordances at this degree of risk. Let's say like no risk or whatever, and you input a lens of, okay, well now you're at a much higher level of risk, and then you see the affordances change or shrink because, okay, well, because of this amount of risk that I'm dealing with, I can't. What is possible changes, and even getting at like a bottleneck level, like at a figuring out the things that would materially, I don't know, materially is the right word, but like things that sort of act as a gateway or a gatekeeper to affordance perception. And obviously I'm kind of mixing words, and I could probably be apart philosophically for trying to incorporate affordances with like perception of risk, which is like very not. I don't think perception of risk is like. I don't think that really. I think that's this. I think we're talking about different layers of representation in some ways, but at the same time, even that's kind of what I'm looking at, because there's top-down representation that influences bottom-up. Like you're just discounting. And I think that's something that actually he mentioned in the tweet. Let's see. He mentioned discount. Or was someone else mentioned that? Someone mentioned discounting something. Yeah. Anyway, there's a lot of things to be refined here that can be much more communicated better later.
Well, yeah, it's something to think about. It definitely, yeah, it's one of these ideas that you have to sharpen up, obviously. But I think we should talk about it more in these meetings. Have like brainstorming sessions. I'm actually going to do that in a bit here. And we'll see how that goes. But yeah, it's a good idea. We should definitely follow up on it. You might think about creating an issue or two on the board about that.
Yeah, that would definitely be an issue, right?
I mean, something more specific than like I want to explore risk perception. Something specific like when we do these brainstorming things, we kind of come up with a couple of points, and so those points might be things that we follow up on. You don't have to. Actually, what you could do is have like an issue, put a link to the tweet, and say,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah, I was going to do that. Let's do that.
okay, yeah. So I think that's good. Yeah, and then once we do that, we can figure out what kinds of approaches we might want to use, and then explore those approaches. So, we've talked about delay discounting, we've talked about free energy principle, we've talked about affordances, agent-based game theory. So those are all like kind of very broad, all over the place. But that's one of the things, like, we don't know how to approach it, so it might be worth kind of thinking about each approach and its strengths and weaknesses, or just picking one approach and saying, let's write a paper, using that one approach. There are a lot of ways you can approach the issue. You could write like maybe a critical review where you say there are a couple candidate approaches that we don't know which one is the best. You could also like think about maybe, how would you model this thing? You can think about data sets perhaps to use as well, but and from a modeling perspective, think about like what you might use to model this. If you wanted to use if there's a specific, say, agent-based model that you can think of that exists, or that you could create that would really capture what you're trying to get at.
Yeah, and I think like there's some opportunities to. I don't want to talk about it right now, but there's some very specific questions. Like there's some very specific. There's some very specific questions. No, that's not Ranger in the back. I can hear that. There's some very specific questions of that I like to look at in this sense, because it's been. I feel like talking about, and I would like to find a better word than risk ultimately, but I feel like there's some very specific things I want to look at that cut across a lot of things, from even to an extent like the developmental AI, and getting to zoom out a little bit from the specific issue of risk. I've been talking to, mostly in like power messages with Brad and stuff, but just how we're looking at critical periods, looking at development AI, we're looking at these phases in growth and how things affect them. And I think one of the really interesting things about human intelligence that we don't really talk a lot about is developmental periods are sort of a full. Not things are reported, but they're supported by, it takes a very particular social relationship between parents or, allies of a child to let this thing that can do nothing for years, and even as it's growing up, 5, 10, 15, like there's a lot of this huge assisted development period, and actually. Just to put this on camera, actually I had another thought last night regarding my stray cat analogy, in terms of there's almost it's almost like a different trajectory in development. of, if you have full stray feral cat, you have sort of this endpoint, which essentially they're designed for. Like a normal, maybe more so like you think about a tiger, but you have a very specific, natural sort of niche that they're designed for. You hide, you capture small rodents, you're very alert. Like that's the biological design. But a house cat is sort of a modification of that, almost compelling them to be maybe more childlike, or neotenous, as Anson might say, in the sense of it readily accepts other people that are much bigger. Like this would be like the domestication process. Is almost a little bit abnormal in the sense of this big thing that could crush you if you're laying next to it and letting it pet you. Who was that? So that's like a little bit of a where I'm going with this is very nebulous thoughts about certain paths of development lead to certain results, and almost like by not going fully on that path, other results are more available in sort of the tree of decision tree or the evolution tree of how to do stuff. And there's obviously like plasticity in that as well. Like the cat, it will probably remember the fact that you were the owner. Like you see those videos about Jeremy the lion who like goes off in the wild and its owner comes back and it's like, oh, I love you, I'm cuddly, But like, it can still be, kill a zebra if it needs to. So there's some ability to switch modes, but at the same time, like you're not going to be. If Jeremy the lion ever meets his owner, Jeremy's going to be the lion who, is the lion. So, just thoughts about that.
Yeah.
I'll leave my rambling thoughts about that, and we can move on to the next one.
Oh yeah, well that was some pretty good thoughts, I think. So you're getting at this. I remember several meetings ago last year we talked about epigenetic landscapes, and in the context of developmental AI, of course, we were talking about energy landscapes and gradient descent, but that also applies to something like behavior, where you have these different options in development. So you start off at a point that's pretty general, especially with respect to behavior, and then you get into these more specific states. And you do that in a way that like sort of leads you down these sort of pathways that are contingent. In other words, you start off at a very general state, then you take a branch, and you can't hop back to some other branch of development. Everything you do when you sort of take a sort of a developmental decision is made, that constricts you to a certain number of different outcomes. So it sort of restricts where you can go in terms of development. But then, of course, you have these different modes of behavior, maybe that you can switch between, that are maybe more innate versus more, we could call it developed. I don't know if I like the terminology, but I think you can get what I'm talking about, where you might have.
I totally do, and I appreciate you saying those things. And I'm smiling hard because that's all very true. And like I am going to. Cats here are just going crazy right now. So if you hear like noises and bells and jingles, that's why.
Yeah.
I'm smiling because of that, but also because I'll say it here, just so I ever watched this video a long time ago, and like, when was the first time you actually told anybody about this idea? Seriously. I'm actually totally not lab related, but I have some a bit of art and music that I'm sort of writing, and the title of my concept album, in theory, is actually Path Dependency.
Okay.
Which is about this what we're talking about here. Because that's been a major fascination for me in many fronts. And so I thought about that this week and last week in a very simple way. But there's a lot of things that are on those lines for me. So yes, I appreciate you mentioning all the past stuff. I talked about that too, and I keep going back to that as it. I think maybe, to be very honest, I think developmental AI is probably the best macro, like, for this stuff specifically. And I mean, I guess it's sort of related to coding in the future too, but all the stuff that I'm talking about really fits under this umbrella of developmental AI, and that's why I got really excited. I'm sure I talked about that like a month or two ago, I think, and I feel like that's, I have had to, as far as time, honestly, the last few weeks to do stuff, but that's really what I feel like is going to be. I wish I could just pull up this analogy that Joshua Tenenbaum had, like how do we make progress in AI or progress in science? And he's like, well, it's going to be many different points and paths connecting to things. It's not going to be direct necessarily, as opposed to like a particular linear path. He's like all this like reverse engineering and starting from inside out and outside in and all this stuff. And it's a much cooler way to present that idea, I'm sure. But I feel like in this context of stuff, I think developmental AI is sort of the right arena to talk about other things, like my stuff on risk, my stuff on path dependency, the critical periods, the epigenetics, the way, like even to the multi-agent stuff and the social stuff. Like I think that's a really cool, I don't know, arena for all this stuff. So yeah.
Yeah, I think that's true. I mean, we're kind of getting our hands around this approach. I know we've done some papers on it, and I don't know what the most effective way to develop it as a framework is. I've just been I think we've been kind of thinking about it in terms of papers and sort of the basic outlines of what it looks like, what this should look like, at least from our perspective. But I think it would be useful maybe even to have like a I don't want to say like a wiki type approach, but basically to have like different definitions so that, if we have like a paper, we write a paper using developmental AI as an approach, we can like kind of have a place where there's certain terminology that's defined, have certain sort of schematics that exist that show kind of the relationship between things. I know we kind of have gone over this idea of developing a path dependence in development, and then linking that to the sort of the pseudo anatomy, because we have these agents that evolve, but then there's also this behavioral consequence of that. So, all those things I think are very hard to communicate in maybe like a 10-page paper, but they'd be easier to communicate if you had like a framework that you could show how these things are related. So, if I said, I'm interested in applying developmental AI to this problem. Okay, what is path dependence? The definition of path dependence. What's the consequence on behavior? What's the consequence on sort of the anatomy or later stages of development? Can we have fixed features, say in an agent? Can we have like an innate feature that just kind of gets expressed no matter when, versus something that has to develop over time? And then, is that something that you can, switch between as an agent? So, for example, if you had like an ability to sense light, and I'm thinking about the Bradenberg vehicle, you might have an innate feature that says, there's a threshold that you have that's, innate. We can put it into like a genetic representation and just express it like as a binary switch. It's either on or off. And then this other trait that's like, okay, you can sense light or not. There's a threshold, but depending what the color of the light is, then you can you can develop these sensitivities. And so the sensitivities might be developed in terms of like a contingency tree. So where we're going, maybe down the path of development, if the agent experiences certain colors, it might start to make a preference for those, or it might be if it doesn't experience certain colors, it might not, it might get locked into a certain set of frequencies of light. so that if it experiences like some UV light at a very late stage of development, it can't recognize it. Or if it experiences nothing but UV light, and then you put it into an environment where it has no UV light and it just has the colors that we can see, then it won't be able to detect it.
And I those are all really good things, and I feel like, I don't know, like I could see us making sort of a, not just like in-house, since we're very open lab, but like a wiki, and also some, I don't know, not position papers, but like delineating this framework, because we have all these pieces, and even like Anson's, I think Anson's busy with something else, but like allostasis machines totally fit with like many of the variations and the variables, and even what I was saying about like it would be fascinating to look at like the Jeremy line stuff and sort of trace some of his the allostasis of his when he's switching between, it's my owner from who I haven't seen in many years, or the stray cat stuff, all the stuff, all my thinking about the stray cat and being domesticated and these things, so like all. But I feel like there's I think that'd be a really interesting project to work on, and even like, I don't know if that wouldn't, it almost makes me think of like a Google Summer of Code project, even though this was not, I mean, maybe you could make this, I don't think it would fit in that venue per se, of like, Google's like pretty much, very specific software, but a sense of like, I feel like there are some specific proposals that we had to like do a lot of the, I think there's a lot of, I don't know if this might be way too much of a stretch, but like, a person approaches the sphere of the principle as a principle, like almost like a developmental AI principle. Does this fit? Like here's our ideas of, I don't know, developmental AI. Do these things fit with what we're proposing about it, kind of thing? I think there's a lot that seems to kind of there's work to be done to flesh out what we mean with all this stuff together and putting it in a coherent way. Which, again, like this would be like, in some ways, I think this is like Anson's genius. It's like this big theoretical, being able to combine all this stuff into a coherent thing. I feel like once he gets back to his full self, like, I'm holding a space for you in time, and I know you want to come in here and say some stuff. So one day you will come back to this moment in time, and I'll create this wormhole, and I'll say a lot of great things about what I'm saying. But until then, there's theoretical work to do, and then also like some, like there's a lot of computational, a lot of cognitive science, a lot of, for lack of better terms, Gary Marcus type stuff to do about cognitive structures and affording more robust AI, as this company's called, and stuff like that. So I feel like this isn't just like, let's have some ideas and talk about it, and like, I don't know what, I'm sure there are, because Friston is Friston, and whatever, but like, I don't really know what his, I don't know what his like aim is. Like, he just kind of goes around and like, this sort of is the principle of stuff kind of thing. But like, there's, when I talk about what we can do with the developmental AI stuff, yes, we can do the theoretical organization, which is heavy work. That's heavy lifting. That's not. But there are ways to do. I'm slapping these papers so much. There are ways to bring some computational heft to it, and like it can. I think there are ways to tie this actually into development of more robust AI, of more robust cognitive structures, and even to some extent, like Lisa Feldman Barrett-esque like diagnostic things regarding human health or mental health or psychological well-being too. Like I think these are all like some valid applications to what we're getting at too. So it's not just playing with ideas, you know. But that's a whole like, you know, that's a big time agenda of effort and development, you know, to change. I'm saying this because this is what I see, not because we have to go there, but
Right.
just to talk about it.
Right. I think we can go in that direction. I think that sounds like a perfectly good direction. Not sure if we have a separate. Well, let me share my screen. Might as well start getting into this. I'm not sure that we have a card for developmental AI.
Oh, we were supposed to. I know we were supposed to.
Maybe. Let's see.
I think it was sort of like. Yeah.
So let me go to this. Yeah, and I think
it's very. Go ahead.
They're sort of buried in some of these other cards. So, like, I think developmental Brainberg vehicles and metabrains, I think those have sort of some of these elements, but I don't think we have one just for. Let me go.
Yeah.
There's actually an empty one up here. So let me do the. Remind myself here. And then we can do like we can put a card out on that as well, and that should work.
Yeah, and that's like that could be a whole like I don't know. That feels like a really big and coherent thing. It's in many ways, you know, in the sense of like the lore of the lab. And are you still here?
Yeah, I'm here. It's just I have my screen share.
Okay. Yeah. The way it displays for me is a little different.
Yeah. Nested screens. Yeah.
I feel like there's a lot of you know, in the lore of the lab there's you know, developmental Brainberg vehicles was like, you know, the thing when I came in here, even like SAM stuff before that, the CGS. So it's like there's sort of this, in terms of like the story of the lab's development, I think developmental AI is sort of like probably the natural, like it's the most, you know, it seemed like it very much seemed like the way forward.
Right.
For a lot of things, metabrains, developmental stuff. My cognition future stuff is sort of on the side, but very much related to it. And even epistemological directories are kind of all, you know, these things pointing towards this centerpiece. And so I feel like there's a lot to be fleshed out with that. And I don't. That seems like it's a whole bigger than a discussion to have. We have it in the meetings here, and then also things to follow up with Slack, because I feel like that's something that I've never really. The scope that I'm seeing this discussion at now is actually I've never really had that full scope about it. So I'll have to talk about that later, I think.
Yeah. Well, yeah, we can follow up on this in Slack and on next week, and yeah, so that's good, and let's keep that going. Let's think in that direction. I'll make a project card and maybe some issues on that. So I did want to get into this, start getting into the submissions, so we can sort of know where we are on this. So okay, we have developmental AI, the first thing on the list, and so that's of course there's this OHBM Twitter conference which is coming up. I think they're going to release, like they have a website here. And they haven't put the information for 2021 down, but I think like it opens up at the beginning of February. So we'll give them some time to get out, like to open up. Like I guess you have to submit an abstract, and then we can maybe think about like doing some of this stuff for developmental AI, like we did last year with the Brainberg vehicles for this Twitter conference.
Yeah.
So if you recall, it was like five tweets with a summary tweet, or like maybe a tweet like to introduce things, and then a summary card that gives more information. But then the meat of your presentation would be the 5 tweets that we could break into 5 things. Like what are the 5 things people should take away from this idea? And we mentioned some of those with respect to, like maybe affordances or, innateness versus development, contingency, all those things. You can, basically lay out the top 5, give examples, give an image that would lay out kind of a diagram, and then I think that would be very useful as well to have like as a reference for people. Yeah. So that's something that we can do. The Artificial Life Conference, we might go back to our paper that we submitted to the workshop, the Baby Minds workshop, and the Artificial Life paper needs to be a little bit longer. So the Artificial Life paper needs to be 8 pages, whereas I think that workshop was like 4 to 6. So we had, things that we had things in there. I think we have an like a appendix or 2, so that I don't really know what the page number is, or the page length is right now, but I think we have room to add some more things in there. So I think we need to be a little bit more specific in certain areas, especially with respect to like the sort of the developmental landscape, we'll call it, and spelling that out and how that maps to what we're talking about. So that there are opportunities to develop it here in the papers. But I did want to get to some of the ones we're running up against deadlines on now. So the first one is Allostasis machines paper. And that is this one. This is for SIGCHI. And I was talking to Daniela Cialfi in Slack about this. And she's someone who hasn't been to the meetings, but she's active on Slack, and
Yes.
she's Italian, and she wants to get involved in some of the papers. So I gave her permissions to edit this paper. The deadline is in about a week, so we have about a week to go through these things and make changes. So basically, this is the state of the allostasis machines paper. So the title is a bit long, maybe a bit wordy. Maybe we want to not use this subtitle. I'm not really sure what the optimal subtitle is for this, but we'll figure that out. If you have good ideas, propose them in the comments here. So right now it's Bradley, Anson, and Jesse, and if Daniela contributes, in the next week, then I'll put her on as well as an author. The abstract is still, it's pretty decent. I think it's in about the right word length. I think it's 150 is the limit or something close to that. But this part I'm not crazy about, this way this is, I wrote this up, actually, this part. It maybe needs to be changed a bit because it's like, I kind of wrote it when we had the outline, and then when the paper actually got fleshed out, we didn't really talk about this as much. So this maybe needs to be changed a bit, but that's something for later. So the introduction, the paper starts with, the brain is an allostasis machine. And this is something that was a claim that was made in the virtuality talk at Neuromatch 2. So this is something that was like, people say the brain is a computer. The brain is not a computer, and there's this huge, fight over it. I'm saying that the brain is an allostasis machine, and, you can fight me about it. Or not. But,
It's like the meme where it's like, the brain is an allostasis machine on the card in front of the desk, and the guy just there and changed my mind.
Yeah. Actually, that would be a good, if we put this, ultimately we make a link to this on Twitter, we can use that meme as an advertisement. Yeah.
We'll look into that now.
Or we could do it on the project card, or when we put the project card out on Twitter too. But yeah, it's definitely a stance that's not mainstream. And so the question is, what is an allostasis machine, and why do we think that? So that's the whole gist of the paper. kind of link it into human-computer interaction and neuroscience. So neuro-HCI, this interdisciplinary relationship that we're sort of proposing here, that, people looked at brain-machine interfaces, for example, but there's no theory behind it. So this is kind of filling that gap. There are other places where it could be applicable. So go through like homeostasis and allostasis. So that's I think a logical starting point. Homeostasis being this source of internal regulation, and they go through from Ashby's homeostat through to this idea of the internal milieu, and then I have this other citation that came up that there's this idea that homeostasis is a nice model, but it isn't sufficient because it's an equilibrium model. It doesn't allow you to model far from equilibrium phenomenon. So this is a cite from physics where they talk about out of equilibrium things with temperature, because we mentioned the thermostat in here somewhere. Oh, in the next paragraph. So that sets that up. Talk about regulating with feedback loops, but again, it's not a dynamical type of representation. So then we get into allostasis as dynamic homeostasis, which is an idea from Sterling and Iyer, where they develop it for physiology and allostatic drive specifically. So then we get into allostasis machines. So this is really just a description of the machines themselves. And this is a graphical description here where you have this internal initial condition, which is the internal state. And then you have this trajectory that is perturbed by this external force. And it's either recovers completely or it exhibits this sort of, what did I call it? It's down here further. Hysteresis, which is where it's not, like if you stretch a rubber band and it returns to its original shape, it recovers, but if you stretch it and it remains stretched out, it's what they call hysteretic. So that's what that it refers to. And then this series of sort of hysteretic perturbation recoveries leads you maybe to a new state. It can drive you from this equilibrium point. But the point is that you don't always it isn't always trying to recover to this initial state. It can be driven away, and it can be driven to this regulated state, which is something different. That's the idea. And so this is, and it depends on the sort of frequency of perturbation and the strength of the perturbation, which are kind of laid out later in the paper here. Talk a little bit about the event-oriented trajectory. So it's an event-oriented approach. So, we're linking it to some set of things in time. And I don't mention this in here, but that's actually quite amenable to neuroimaging, where you have event-oriented things going on. Especially if you're using something like EEG. If you're using something like fMRI, it might be a little bit harder to map it to event-oriented states. But, you can use things like naturalistic types of fMRI, and that can get you something similar. There are other methods like FNIR, which is a method where they measure, they're smaller sensors that can measure blood flow, and, they're responsive to certain things going on in the brain, like shifts in attention and things like that. So those are all things that are event-oriented, meaning that there are events going on in cognition that, lead to some outcome. And, when you think about it in a naturalistic way, that makes sense as a dynamical system. And so I don't really get too much into dynamical systems in here, because I was thinking earlier about maybe citing some things from the dynamical systems literature, but I don't know. Let me make a note here on this. The problem is, of course, is that we don't have a lot of room here for Okay, there we go. So those are all things to consider. Now, so what has Jesse been doing up here? Oh, Daniela's in the chat here. She's doing. Okay, my opinion, no. Okay. So for.
Oh, did that just happen? Because I noticed that I couldn't, like, I didn't see her comments until I went into my version of the document and opened it. Like, I didn't see them on the screen.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I get 9:57, so it was like a couple minutes ago. So it's okay. Good. Well, she's not here in the meeting, but I think she's working from somewhere else. She's in the document.
Team.
Yes, distributed teams. So this is good. This is an example of our distributed teams in action here. So yeah, thanks for this meme.
I'm not sure which one to use, or if the caps are too much, but it's funny because, like, the power of the internet is such that in 45 seconds, like, they just, have this pace of your.
Why don't you make a couple versions and put it in like on Slack or something, and we can.
Yeah, well.
Because I want to get the image. It's kind of hard to extract the images out of these documents, but yeah. So that's good. Let's see. So that was the idea here, and so laying out the idea of homeostasis and allostasis, then allostasis machines. Then this event-oriented trajectory of internal state. Then, yeah, so again, like, we don't have a lot more room in here. I know, like, yeah, so we're in, okay, good. I think she's going through the references, which is good. So we're, like, at 8 pages here of, well, we have to optimize the space. And then, of course, this is going to be put into a template, so it's going to be a little bit different in terms of the page length, but I think our limit is 6 pages, so we have to remember that for the final version. So we go from this event-oriented trajectories to this idea of I put recovery capacity equals allostatic drive. I think it needs to be made clearer to the audience that that's what allostatic drive is in this context. And so this is a second diagram showing sort of this single, if you go to figure 1, you see this, when the perturbation hits this function, it deforms it, so it's like this, there's this hysteretic change. If you go down here, there's a hysteretic change, but we break it down into the subcategories. So you basically have your baseline function, which is like if you think about neuroimaging, it might be like sort of a resting state or some other baseline. And baselines are always problematic, but in our case, we're just thinking very generally of a baseline. And then we use our magnitude, which is this perturbation C being delivered to the function. So the magnitude is B. Maybe these should be switched, but I don't think it matters too much. I mentioned it in the paper, magnitude and then perturbation, but so in any case, this is how perturbation happens. The magnitude of change is the response, and then there's a further response, which is the recovery once the perturbation is completed. So you can think of a perturbation as being like something very general, but very applicable to, say, like, like the thing with when you put those figures in the paper here, I was reading and then the paper shifted. So that's a perturbation. My attentional capacity is shifted. It's like a distraction. And so, like, I kind of maybe lose my train of thought, or maybe I can recover my train of thought. And that's actually quite a good example of what's going on here, right? Like, if I'm at a baseline and I'm doing something, and this isn't a baseline, this is just normal cognition, there's a perturbation, an attentional shift, where something gets disrupted, and then there's a magnitude of disruption, and then there's a recovery of that. So it can either recover to the original state, might be able to recover myself pretty quickly, or I totally lose my train of thought and forget about it. And that's something else. So the recovered state is something, whatever it is, whether you're recover your train of thought or you don't. And then, so that's all broken out, and that's mentioned up in this section. And then down here, is more about hysteresis. And then this is talking about kind of how do you characterize the strength of a perturbation. So kind of maybe putting some parameters on it, and maybe some measurement quantities. You know, that we don't have a lot of room to talk about that, but just to mention it. And then this final part where examples from a specific environmental representations. So this is, you know, talking about, I think we talk about Bradenberg vehicles in here and predictive models for neuroimaging, psychophysiological data, and then a little bit about virtual environments. So not much, which is something that in the outline we had like 3 sections, but that doesn't really matter. I think it's fine. And then in the discussion, I wanted to cite this paper, Durish. It's actually a book. It's called Where the Action Is, The Foundations of Embodied Interaction. And I'm not sure if I posted that book in the chat, in Slack, but it's a book that I remember reading years ago, and it was great. It had a lot of interesting stuff in it. And it's very much in this spirit of like emergent interaction and embodied interaction and enactivism. So we'll probably cite that somewhere in here. Again, just like as just to put it in there to mention it, you know, so when they're reviewing the paper that they get that they know that we're kind of serious about this. So yeah, these are the references, and then that's pretty much it. I think we're in good shape overall. So that's what that paper looks like. Do you have any thoughts about that?
No. I need to go through it all again. And then there's a little bit of things that I haven't seen yet, outside of the names, obviously. But I think this is the first one that's due, right? This is the first on our list.
Yeah, it's the 31st, so it's like in, I think.
Okay, I think that's going to be like an absolute due today. Is I'm just going to go over that because I want to. There's a few things I want to say, but I think it's overall in good shape, and yeah, so that's good.
Okay. Yeah. So yeah, this is, and then this meme is nice. We'll use that on Twitter and on, probably, you know, to.
It'll be like my major contribution to the paper will be the meme. Yeah.
Well, you know, it's good to have this supporting materials, right?
Figure number 1.
Yeah, figure 8, figure 7.
Let's refer to figure number 1 for
yeah.
our thoughts on this matter. Yeah.
So figure number 7 is a idea in like biomedical papers where they have like the 7th figure is always like the main idea, like you have your main idea at the beginning, and then at the end you take your results and you interpret them as a main idea, a takeaway. And this is like a figure 7, but in meme form. Okay, so that's allostasis machines. Now, let's move to Gibsonian information. So yeah, this is allostasis machines. So I don't know if we can put a red here to just kind of say we're in the red zone on that or whatever.
I was gonna ask, like, what are the different, like, I see like yellow and like an orange. What are those? Just orange is past stuff?
Color codings? No, I don't really know what. I don't have a color scheme, but I think I've just been making these in the like colors. So this one is accepted. All right, and this is to be done. We have to do the presentation on it.
Yeah, that's one of our cards. Yeah.
Yeah, and then these are kind of like outstanding. Maybe I'm not really sure. I'll have to think about a better color coding scheme for this, but I just have like stuff. This is something that has been like this is something that's been peer reviewed but needs to be responded to. So yeah, I don't know if that's a good because these two here are kind of like maybe upcoming deadlines. So, it's yeah. So it's kind of it's kind of an ad hoc color scheme, but it's okay. We'll work it out. It's not.
Yeah, I was gonna implement some like organization of that, and then I got a little bit sidetracked. So that's something that I could do, lab manager stuff more later. I don't mind. We have other things to talk about now.
Just when you do so, please have like maybe you could put a color code on below.
A key.
Yeah, key, so we know. And then this red, I think, would be good for the numbers so that we know which are coming up. We're coming up on deadlines. That might be useful. So then we have this. The next one down that I want to talk about is the Gibsonian information paper. That is here, 23. I know they're not in order of time, but it's not that important. You can sort it if you want, but so this is CogSci 2021, and this is a hybrid conference that's coming up in the summer, and they want papers by the 3rd. There's a template for this one too, and I'm not quite.
Is that a full paper, or is that?
Yes,
I know the Gibsonian one is a paper. But.
So both of these are, I think, 6-page limits. Okay. So this Gibsonian information is February 3rd. It's 6 pages. And I don't know if you've been able to do anything with cognitive futures or...
I haven't, but I think I will. I think I'm going to try to put something together. The timing is a little bit not ideal right now, but I think I gotta try to. I think I'll at least make an effort, and if it doesn't get into this one, then not for well.
Yeah, actually, I think for cognitive science, there's a 6-page paper option, and you can try to maybe shoot for that if you have stuff that you can put together. But there's also an extended abstract, which is a little bit later for the deadline. So this is go to this.
Oh, okay, yeah, I think an abstract is probably a lot better.
Yeah. So. Let me see if
why is the extended abstract deadline later? It's like the paper is just potentially to be presented at the thing.
Well, wait a minute. Is that why it's first? Maybe I want to make sure I'm right on this. Maybe this is wrong. Okay, so submissions close February 3rd. So I'm not sure what I was thinking here. I may be thinking the wrong conference. It's possible.
That's fine. I mean, they just say abstracts. There are 4 categories: research papers, contributed symposia, and never abstracts. I don't know what. Yeah. I think I'm actually a member because I joined last year and it was like 3 or something. So.
Yeah. I'm a member too now. I mean, just they said join. Join for free or how much ever you can pay, and I renewed, so I'm a member now. And even if I have to be the author on it, I think you're probably a member though, so it's fine. But why don't we find out about this in terms of the member abstracts? At least just to get it up and to get something into the conference where people can see it in the proceedings. So this is the Gibsonian information paper. Oh, I keep making that mistake. Okay. So this is the Gibsonian information paper. So this one is, again, with the subtitle, I'm not quite sure I want to, it seems like you can optimize that, but, it's, again, one of those things that's, you figure out the last minute. It's not. I had a mentor tell me once that if you're writing a title and there's there's a colon in it, then it's too long. If you do a lot of people do the title and then the colon, the subtitle, and he's like, well, if you have a colon in there, the title's too long. And I've had other people tell me that you don't want to make it any longer than 8 to 10 words. So those are all things to keep in mind when making up a title. It's actually, I think, people will just refer to it as Gibsonian information. So, in any case, so the abstract, here's the abstract. We're at about 100 and probably 150 words. Let me see. Well, 180. So, and then this first part, not quite sure if this is the right gist to start at the end. It's always hard to start an abstract off because it's like, you know, you have that, you want to really kind of capture people's imagination, but you don't want to also go off on a tangent. So, yeah, this probably needs to be changed, but I'm not sure how. If you have suggestions, please put them in the comments or change it here. And then introduction. So this kind of goes into this idea of Shannon information and what it is. I don't want to get too deeply into Shannon information because I don't want to misinterpret it, but I also don't want to sort of spend the paper on Shannon information. Yeah, so that's basically what we're motivating it with, though. And then we get into this idea of Gibsonian information. And now that I think about it, I really need people to read this introduction part because I'm not really sure if it makes complete sense because it was kind of written like it's kind of hard again to figure out how to introduce the thing and motivate it. So, if you have suggestions on this introduction, that would be useful. The mechanics might not be quite there yet, so it would be good to go over that, look at it. So this is just kind of Gibsonian information is inspired by the work of ecological psychologist J.J. Gibson and provides us with a measurement of information both intrinsically tied to embodied agents and fundamentally different from Shannon information. So then, we talk about Shannon information relying on the presence of variation, GI relying upon the presence of interpretable motion against a random or static background. I don't know if that's really true, but I mean, maybe that mention something about maybe something about direct perception. So then we kind of get also into non-neuronal systems. So kind of like, kind of tells us how broadly applicable this concept is to systems that are both sort of explicitly cognitive and maybe less cognitive. So that's, kind of gets, and also into talking about like collective behavior as well. So then it gets into embodied observers and affordances. So one critical component of GI is the embodied observer, and then this stuff about isolated and correlative affordances. So this is kind of going on about like how they're different affordances, and the way these affordances in this may be a little bit unorthodox, but again, if you have ideas about like how to maybe, I don't know, maybe we're missing some references here. This is something, again, another set of eyes or several sets of eyes will help with in terms of debugging some of this. So, if it's, it doesn't seem right to propose changes. Then, so we get into these measures of GI, disjoint distribution, contingent action, which is something we talked about earlier with respect to developmental AI, and then coherent movement. So these kind of give examples, and then this is the figure summarizing all of this. So it's a little busy, but it's, I think it tells the story in a decent way. And then we have this example of 4-channel embodiment, which is where we have 4 sensory channels, and we have, we're using a developmental Bradenberg vehicle. I don't know if we actually, maybe that's a little bit, I don't know how much we use the example, so. because I wanted to use that as sort of a, because you'll see in a minute why I'm a little skeptical with that. But that's fine. I mean, we can fix that. But I definitely want to talk about that because it's, I think, an important thing to bring up. So we talk about multisensory embodiment, this 4-channel analysis, and then in this figure we use a rabbit. So we don't use the vehicle, but we use a rabbit, which is like a stand-in where it's a much more complex nervous system. But the idea is it's a multisensory system that has senses coming in from different directions, and the idea is they have to be integrated in some way. And if they're all going in the same direction, it's easier, but if they're going in different directions, it's harder. But of course, if they're going in different directions, it actually gives you more information. And there's a sort of a conundrum there that we talk about in here. And then there's discussion that we're kind of running up against the page limit, so it's a problem. But that's, I mean, that can be probably fit. We can probably get it to 6 pages in this document. I think we should be able to meet the constraints of the template, because a template is, I think it's a 2-column template. So, I mean, it may give us a little bit more room. They usually do in the 2-column templates, which are kind of like an engineering template. But that's what we have for this paper. So we don't have a lot of room for changes and adding things. But if we have something we need to add, we should add it. Definitely make clarifications to things.
Yeah, I think there's a few things to go over.
Yeah. Any other comments about it, or?
Not right now. I think it's something that I have to I'm gonna try to go through both these papers fully today because it's something that I've been wanting to do, and I feel like I have to there's a lot of things that I would, there's a lot of specific things that I would like to take a little bit of time to reference with some of the things that I looked at from Varela and Chamero, and just kind of talk to myself about that and then come back to this paper a bit more. So I just had to sit down and do that, really.
Okay. Yeah, I think and definitely the deadline for this is the 3rd, which is a couple more days off, but it's still coming up pretty quickly here. So I'll color code the screen, not that it means anything, but
yeah, it helps me. I like the color code. Also, I was considering yeah, I'm gonna hold my comments for the time being. It wasn't about the paper; it was about all the stuff about this. So
okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. So that's the color coding. Those are those 2 papers. Now, those are going to do. Let's try to aim for next weekend to get this out. I'll have to put them into this template, which might take a little bit of work to get it exactly right. But that's, I want to get most of the editing done by then, and then to get it submitted into the online system, which takes about an hour or so usually, if it's a good online system. So that's good. And then the last thing I wanted to talk about, and this is coming up a little bit later, is this abstract for the shared visual, for the, where is it? It's SURE. I'm not seeing it. Oh, this one. Okay, all right, so this is Scientific Understanding and Representation. This is a workshop that I guess has been put on for the last couple of years. It seems a little bit more like a philosophy type workshop, but it's definitely maybe something we can contribute to. 300 to 500 word abstract. This is a link, this Easy Chair link, but there's also, I think, I don't know if this is the website or not. The Easy Chair doesn't give you the website, but there's a website for this. I think you can just search for Scientific Understanding and Representation Workshop, and it gets you like last year's workshop, and it has a bunch of papers that were accepted. So this one, I think we're going to work out some of the issues from the talk that I gave to the Philosopher's Web Cafe in December. So this is Representations in the Observer. So this is the Observers in the Scientific Method. This is an abstract. So where are we in terms of the word count here? This is 185 words. And they want it in the neighborhood of 300 to 500 words. So there's a bit more work to do in terms of getting, putting this together for submission. Again, this isn't a whole paper, so you might think it's easier, but we don't know yet. We have to come up with something really exciting, but something that isn't going to puzzle them, which is always a problem. You don't want to puzzle people because they'll reject your abstract. So this kind of goes into this idea of the observer. In this submission, we utilize an agent-based approach to the role of observers in phenomenology and scientific empiricism. Go through this, and then we turn our attention towards two model systems, the genotype-phenotype representation and the morphogenetic agents, which are two agents that you saw in that talk. And then kind of going through what those are and why that's like the observer is important in that. And then the addition of agency to such representations enables us to approach long-standing scientific questions in new ways. And so then we will also consider how our model systems enable novel approaches to the scientific method. And so there are probably some things to add. So like after this sentence, for example, we could add a couple of things, maybe one or two sentences. After this one, we could add one or two sentences. And then probably this genotype-phenotype representation requires some explanation of what that is. So there's, I think, enough that we can make 300 to 500 words. I don't think that's the problem. I think getting the words onto the screen are going to be the problem, and getting a nice description of it. So I don't know if people are interested in this. Please, provide, like you can. Let's see. I'll put the link in the chat. I guess it's just Jesse who's going to be able to get to this, but I'll put this link in the usual channel, which is the conference channel that we are using for this, for these submissions. And I might post it a little bit later. And again, like this is stuff that we can massage out. If you have suggestions for changes, or the title, I think the title is pretty decent, but definitely, if you want to be involved in this, you can. We have to, if this is accepted, then we have to create slides and the whole thing. So there are opportunities to become involved in that as well. Jesse, do you have any comments on that?
I'm sorry, I think I was muted again. I don't have any immediate comments, but I think it would be good for me to look, and everybody who's interested probably, to just review. I don't know if Charlotte ever posted the talk somewhere, but I don't know if we have a recording of it.
Yeah, it's on the YouTube channel.
Okay, so it is there, and it's very good talk. But reviewing some of the concepts from that, I think, would be good. And I haven't looked at all. It's the first time seeing the abstract for me, so I will put that on my editing list for sure. Yeah. But no like fun comments right now.
Okay. Yeah. The deadline is the 15th, so it's a ways off of February. So it's a ways off still. So yeah, the red tag here is just for the things that are maybe coming up in the next week and a half. That's how we'll do that. And then this deadline actually is probably, I don't know. I think, like, yeah, they'll probably by February 1st they'll have some information about this.
Yeah, I can you hear me now?
Yeah, yeah.
I looked at their website a few moments ago, and I didn't see any information yet, so still no hard deadline for that. But I think, when do we present in March last year or February? Like
Late February.
Okay, so I'm sure. I feel like they've actually mentioned it on Twitter. Actually, like I feel like I've seen talk about it, but I don't see anything on their website yet. So I'll look into that.
Yeah, they probably announced, like, they say, well, it's coming soon, but I don't think they've made any formal announcements yet. I guess if the timeline's the same, it's probably going to be, like, in February. So,
also, could you do me a favor and add something to that list on the sheet? I don't think I put it on there. It'll probably be oral, yeah. And it would be just New York celebration of women in computing. Actually, that's the venue. I forget, but you can just switch it over. Women in computing, yeah.
well, actually, that's the venue, but yeah.
Yeah, that's. Did I mute myself again?
No, I can hear you. So
Okay.
then,
Yeah, that's the venue, and you could just leave that part blank, but just so that's on there for me. It will likely be something related to society and ethics because I presented, or was going to present. I presented each year the last 3 years, even though one was sort of canceled. It'll be my third time presenting there, but it'll be in that category. And also, I don't know, Envision's on there, so okay.
Yeah.
That's good. And then I'll add, actually, could you also put another one in there that just for the venue and just say AI Now project? Or, yeah, AI Now, and then the deadline of, just say, March, I guess. Just, yeah.
it's March 1.
I'll fill it in later, but just because I can't access this at the moment.
What is the deadline for the celebration of women in computing?
I have been trying to figure that out yet. I think they just updated their website. Because I don't know yet, but someone, like a lot of people from my former university have helped with it, so I'll either ask them or try to find their website. I think it's not urgent. It's at least a month away, I think. So yeah.
Right. Yeah. So then that's good. And then of course there are these papers, NERCS. This one I think Jesse went over, so thank you for that. And then this one actually is just something I'm going to submit. That's an old paper that I did, but I wrote it about 7 years ago, and I found it recently. And it looks pretty good, and I've decided to submit that as well. So so those are coming up on the 1st, but that's going to be, let me put red marks here, just so we're consistent. I keep making that mistake. Okay. So yeah, and then that'll be, we'll have that in submitted.
Could you actually put a red mark also by the Envision one, just like for my attention, because I feel like that's something that I need to do this weekend ultimately.
Which one is the Envision?
13. Number 13, I believe.
Oh no, that's not it. Oh, it's 12. Oh, well, yeah, we have 2 13s. And usually, like, when they build buildings, they skip the 13th floor, but we're putting 2 13s in, so we're pretty confident.
For the anti-bad luck.
Yeah.
No pandemic can slow down our distributed lab. Yeah.
No. So that's good. All right, so that's good. And we have, I don't know why this is going. All right. So that's, all right, so that's the submissions. Do we have anything else we want to talk about before we move on to...
I think that's it for me.
Okay. So yeah. So now we'll move on to the... I have some papers and some other things to tie up before we go. This is something that this is actually following up on the thing Jesse was talking about earlier. Brains do not process information they created. This is a quote from Buzaki, and this is Miguel Nunez, who mentioned he had this thread where he just put this quote, and then a bunch of people were attracted to it like moths to a flame. And it was actually a pretty good flame because it had generated a lot of conversation. This is Maxim Roginski, who's at the U of I in Illinois, and he's interested in like information theory, but cognitive science and all this other stuff. He takes information theoretic perspective on it. The distinction between processing and creation of information can be thought of in the same sense as the distinction between combinatorial emergence, combination of existing primitives observables, and creative emergence, construction of new primitives observables. So that's an interesting point. And this is like kind of thinking about like a representation on a brain. So like, what is the brain creating when you say that the brain is creating information? So brains do not necessarily process it, they create it. So you're having to create information. There was a bit of talk about like thermodynamics and how it can't create new work, but that's I think Maxim had another post that said that that's not really relevant here because we're talking about information. And there's all this, like, this is why I don't want to get too deeply into Shannon information in the Gibsonian information paper, because I don't want to like misinterpret information theory too much. I want to give a broad outline, but I don't want to get in because it's like it gets contentious when you get down to the into some of the detail on it. Some of that is just historically how sort of information theory has existed relative to thermodynamic entropy, but there are other reasons as well. So this led me to find this book where this quote came from. So Miguel's quote was actually from a book by Gregory Buzaki, The Brain from the Inside Out. And so Buzaki is a neuroscientist, and he's talking about the brain, like, as a biological machine or biological entity that is actually creating information in its networks here. So I thought about this a little bit, and there were also some good papers. This is one, A Variational Approach to Nonlinear Estimation. I think this is something that Maxim suggested in the thread, which is a nice information theoretic approach to this. But I was thinking about this in terms of the statement, in terms of how it relates to like radical embodied cognitive science, and what we're doing with Gibsonian information and what Gibson has to say. And I'm going to use my Jamboard here. I have a Wacom tablet here, and I'm going to try to make some notes here. Okay, I think that works. I don't know, maybe it's not going to work because I have this, I don't know why it's not, I guess it's not going to work. Yeah, I don't know if it's going to work because I've got another mouse on here hooked up. So, let's see. If I shut the mouse off, it'll work. Well, anyways, that was a nice try. But let me turn the mouse back on. So I'm not going to use the Jamboard for this. I'm just going to kind of go through my notes on it.
It seems to be working now. But,
it is? Let's see.
I just saw a cursor on the screen.
Oh, it was my mouse that I had on. Okay, I don't know why it's not working, but in any case, yeah. So it's fine. We'll do it another day. It's not that important. I just wanted to show off pretty much, but I've been wanting to use it for a while, and I don't know how to incorporate it in the meetings. It would be great if it worked, but so I'm not going to share my screen for this part. I'll just talk. So, I was thinking about how that quote kind of fits into what we've been talking about with a lot of the stuff. And it sort of almost exists in opposition to radical embodied cognitive science. Because what I understand about radical embodiment, the idea is that there's no real representation in the brain, that you have this representation in the environment, and the brain is actually taking in that representation or using it. Whereas in this quote, what's going on is the brain is actually creating a representation and information, and actually, maybe independent of the environment. But there's definitely something there. You could compare the two kinds of approaches to the problem.
Yeah, and you mean the Bazaki quote?
Yeah. So I guess for finding the question, it would be, what does the brain represent, and what does the environment represent? If the environment, has like things like affordances and structure, and the brain is it merely interpreting that, or is the brain creating stuff, information, and maybe like taking in things about the world and synthesizing it? So it's like everything in the world is kind of like piecemeal, and then we create this rich representation in our brain, and then we operate the world as if that's reality. That.
Yeah, it's very interesting, and I think back to many of the things from, like the maybe not the genomic bottleneck talk at NeuroIPS, but from the Expect conference, which is about predictive processing and so on and so forth. Andy Clark related stuff. There was some really good talks, and also Lisa Feldman Barrett was there, but there were a few before, and I don't remember the names of them. And I feel like it's almost like I really don't like the word. I feel like I use the word spectrum a lot, but it's sort of like there's kind of this. There's physical constraints on the information that is taken in, and one of the talks at the Expect conference showed how, I don't know if neurologically is the right word, but it looked at sort of evolutionary, like physical body adaptations that would, why is the eye more sensitive to certain kinds of light or angles from this perspective? Like, why does your periphery view this particular way versus the different when you're looking head on? Like, there's these physical, I don't really like the word bottleneck here, but I'm going to say bottleneck. There's these physical bottlenecks that constrain input, okay? And that's sort of like, I think radical embodied cognition kind of operates not quite at that level, but like basically around that area of like input dominant view of cognition, like inputs. I won't say equal outputs, but like inputs are basically, out everything is sort of, just input derivative. And I feel like that's categorically disprovable. Like, I can mentally choose to think about something that has not happened ever in my lifetime and act like it's real. Like the JFK assassination. I've never observed that, but I can think about it as much as I want to. Like that's. So I mean, like I talk about radical embodied cognition a lot, but I don't think that's. I think I have actually a similar enough view to Shamiro in that it's really important and kind of overlooked. It's not everything. Okay, so I think, again, I don't really like the word spectrum, but it's like as you go up to certain processes, there's stuff that happens, and to kind of flip this back to what I was saying earlier about about risk as a force or element or act, something that's inhibiting affordance perception. Like I think there are ways that sort of, I think there's something to, I wanna look directly at that quote. I wish I could. I'm gonna try to look at that thread again in general. So reference this. Yeah, here it is. Okay. Brains do not process information, they create it. And I remember, like, Corling said it's about being transcribed, and so on and so forth, and many things that came up in our discussion. I feel like it would be interesting to look at these sort of. I think there's some kind of, again, these words are used very loosely. There's a bit of a symmetry about how there's physical bottlenecking, physical constraint on input information, like, for sure. Like, I made a remark recently about hearing. Oh, actually, I had a. I'm remembering something that I had. This is a complete tangent now, but I'm going to mention anyway. Let me see if I can find it real quick.
Okay.
I just mentioned symmetry, and it's a tangent related to that idea, which I don't think it's going to work, but let me try. I had a conversation with our friend, or my wannabe friend. I guess I could say a friend. I'm not going to say a colleague, but a friend and admired elder statesman compared to me in neuroscience, Dr. Johann John, there's a discussion on Facebook, and he was talking about symmetry, and I'm going to try to find it. He mentioned he's very interested in things like symmetry, like analogy and symmetry, and yeah, here it is. I will share my screen. Why not? Because I sort of can.
Yeah, go ahead.
Can I just do it differently here? Let's see if this works.
Okay. Yeah, it's coming up. Yeah.
Are you seeing?
Yeah, I see the intuitively understanding the concept of symmetry.
So he had an interesting concept of symmetry, and these are always fun things to talk about and do, and so on, and I had this response of, I could see an association between the conceptualization capability for symmetry and basically embodied perception limitations. This is what I was trying to get at before.
Right.
Mentally, there's a big space that you a big space to explore ideas. But today, this made me think about empathy and symmetry. He asked, what's an example of embodied that? And I was saying how, like, I can hear symmetry in music because my ears are comfortable attuned in a range of a certain pitch, the frequency, basically, range that I can deal with. That affects the meaning I can derive from it, too. Like, oh, this chord is ominous, it's happy. Because it's relative, to other things and how I would perceive that. So that's kind of a little bit of what I was getting at.
Yeah.
Like, there's these physical limits. This is sort of bookends, basically, physically. And I think there's a symmetrical form of top-down bookending as well, which comes in risk of other perception. And sometimes it's related to societal stuff. Sometimes it's related to, like, when you get to human level cognition, and I feel like in this lab we're comfortable saying that, but if I in other arenas, AI is taken in such a particular way where it's like in our discussion here in this lab and what we've been talking about, it's not unusual to openly reference human level artificial intelligence or cognition, whatever, with a very open acknowledgement of, like, okay, embodiment, okay, social learning, okay, these other factors at play. But I think to go back to the quote, original quote of brains do not process information, they create it. I think it's a little bit too categorical to say that's entirely the case, but I also feel like, yes, there's inherently generative stuff that's happening. Like, there's undoubtedly generative stuff, and it kind of goes back it's a very old debate about hybrid model, and what is innate, okay, what is what is a, sorry, let me move here, what is an innate fixture, and what can be played around with, and what can or cannot actually what can or cannot be modified, I guess. I lost my train of thought entirely right now, sorry. Let me think. But I think you have enough of my idea to see what I was getting at.
Yeah, I think so.
Because it's in the simplest terms, it's top down versus bottom up. You have some really hard bookends, like in the bottlenecks that I talk about from the bottom up perception. Okay, and radical embodied cognition kind of deals with that realm of stuff. And then you have these sort of representational constraints too, like in a human societal setting, like if someone like the marshmallow test, the famous marshmallow test, that's an example of this too, in the sense of it was originally like, oh yeah, if you could have willpower, then you're going to be successful in life, and then it sort of debunked as like, well, these kids, if you're poor, you don't get marshmallows, so you're going to take the marshmallow.
Yeah,
it's like, oh great, you don't. Where if you have 20 bags of marshmallows at home, and your mom can buy whenever you want, and that's like, that's the value of that thing is different, and the risk associated with that action is so different. Like, you risk the opportunity cost of not having a marshmallow is so different in those situations. So like those are real factors, but those are like,
right.
Representation, sure, generative models, yeah. Like there's this other stuff at play in those choices. Who's being rational here? Who's the economically sound actor? And what? How are you going to measure that kind of thing? Gratification or whatever. So again, that's a bunch of other things. So, yeah.
Well, yeah. Thanks. That's good. That's a good conversation, and we should follow up on that, and maybe in Slack, or maybe next week you can prepare something like some of the maybe a PowerPoint presentation or a set of notes. So I think that's a good thing to follow up on. I had a couple other observations, but I'll leave that for now. Well, that's fine. I didn't know how far we'd get in with it. With respect to direct, so I'm going to draw this out later. That's why maybe more formally for next time. But there's this idea, the Gibsonian idea of direct perception and direct realism, and I found some references that sort of counter that in terms of connectionism and other types of representation. And then I was thinking about the sorts of metabrain models that we've been talking about, and how how we can make go from a Gibsonian information model, combine that with a developmental Bradenburg vehicle model, and then have a more symbolic representation level. So we have these three levels. So we have basically something that isn't representational at all, that just takes in information directly, and then have with constraints, and then we have this Bradenburg vehicle model, which is a connectionist model, which actually we've been kind of referring to it as being non-representational. It's not entirely true. There's a little bit of representation, but it's not symbolic representation, which is the next level, which would be attaching meanings or labels to things, So I think that might be a good thing, and I'll work this out for next time, but that might be a good way to kind of conceive of these things we've been talking about as well, in terms of fitting it into the metabrain approach as well. So So a lot of things that kind of was thinking about this week and haven't. They're kind of nascent. So we'll get to that next week. So also next week we'll we'll kind of finish up on some of these deadlines and then sort of turn our attention to new deadlines. So
I feel like there's and this is something to say in Slack mostly not here, but I think there's some really interesting stuff to be fleshed out regarding developmental AI stuff that we talked about earlier, and also some important things to do with metabrains, and even just for in-house purposes, differentiating metabrains from developmental AI, because there's slightly different foci, and yet there's a lot of overlap, and having they're definitely not. I wouldn't say they're necessarily competing ideologies or anything like that either, but I think the last thing that you said is vital, and so I feel like I wish I could just sort of pause time and flesh out a lot of developmental AI stuff, and flesh out the metabrain stuff, and get to that future point, and then when they're both a bit more there, well, I mean, metabrains is kind of there, but adding that to it and then fleshing it in, putting it with the developmental AI thing we were talking about, I feel like that's going to be a new level, not plateau like in a negative sense, but that's going to be a new vantage point when we get there, and that's very exciting. It's a bit buried in all the specifics of the meeting here, but I feel like that's actually really exciting place to be. So.
Good. Well, thanks for meeting. If you're watching on YouTube, we'll be in Slack, or we'll be next week. We'll be here. If you have any comments, we can address them in Slack, and hopefully this is food for thought. So, thanks for attending. Have a good week.
All right, take care, everybody.
Take care.